crazy to say this 2 years ago.
Yep.
That's absurd.
And I remember thinking at the time before we had Feline on camera, like, oh God, high tide.
I actually I echo that sentiment. When we watched 2 years ago, and I think it was Glenn Jones who was in the sideboard, he's like, yep, we're going to have high tide on. And we're just like, why do you hate us?
Yep.
Why do you dislike us? And then Feline, not only did she won very quickly and destroyed everyone.
We got out of there pretty fast.
No. Well, Gataxian Probe is going to show the hand of Time Spiral, Force of Will, Brainstorm, Flusterstorm, a Candelabra, another copy of Flusterstorm, and a Flooded Strand. For a minute there, I thought that was a Caracas, but it's just a Flooded Strand.
So for those of you who are not that familiar with Legacy, the way that Feline's deck works is the signature card here is High Tide. That allows her lands to generate more mana. She plays it alongside a variety of untapped land effects, most notably Candelabra of Tanos. There's a couple other cards involved there. That allows her to cast Time Spiral, generating mana as she goes. This can be finished off with some sort of Storm Kill, Blue Sun Zenith for a bunch, or what have you. But High Tide plus effects that untap her lands cause her to generate mana as she draws cards.
Now, of course, Chris's goal here is to kill her before she does all of those things, because when High Tide's actually starting to go off, it's actually pretty difficult to stop.
Chris's deck is, even if you are not that familiar with Legacy, you could read the deck list and probably gather what's going on here. Feline's less so the case.
VanMeter is going to cast a Brainstorm right now into the face of a Flusterstorm. Flusterstorm could have taken care of that Brainstorm, but Longmore decided, that's fine, you can Brainstorm all you'd like. So VanMeter will draw 3 and put 2 back here. It looks like he ran into a fetch land as well to make it a perfect one.
And Feline may want this mana just to be able to Brainstorm this turn, as again, her hand only had 1 land in it.
Now, oftentimes what happens when playing High Tide is you just cast a couple of cantrips in the opening turn to see an island just roll off the top of the deck. Cast a couple of, cantrips. You've got Brainstorm, Preordained, Ponder, all that stuff. You try to set up a perfect hand, and then you just rock and roll on turn number 4.
Yeah. So High Tide is a little bit less explosive. Feline's absolute best hands can win on the 3rd turn. Turn 4 is a lot more stable. Chris's deck we saw earlier can effectively generate turn 1 wins. But what Feline loses in explosiveness, she gains in stability. There's a lot more redundancy, a lot more cantrips. So even though her deck's a little bit slower, it has a much more consistent turn on which it goes off.
VanMeter going to sacrifice Flooded Strand and go get himself a copy of Volcanic Island. Chris does not have to worry about Wasteland in this matchup, so able to search out the dual lands this go around.
Yeah.
Two-headed giant challenge. Your pairings for round.
And both players sitting here at 4-0 in our 9-round Legacy tournament. VanMeter having a lot of trouble in Legacy recently, but looking like he's figured some things out this weekend. Playing a very powerful deck in Sneak and Show.
I believe that he has a 2-mana land and a sneak attack, but no blue card yet, and he's aware that Feline has a copy of Force of Will in her hand, and that Flusterstorm. So it's going to be pretty tough for Chris to push through this.
Now, what Chris could do here is he could just cast this one, force Feline to Force of Will, plus remove a blue card, just to get that part of the game over with. Because I don't think Chris is going to win a counter war to get Sneak Attack through, because Longmore has 2 copies of Flusterstorm in her hand.
Yeah, this is tough. The problem is that Sneak Attack is really valuable for Chris, in part because Feline's Disruption is Flusterstorm. So Show and Tell is just going to be fraught with a lot more peril than Sneak Attack is.
Well, I just like the idea of, okay, I'm going to cast this one. You have to force one moving a blue card. Your deck actually cares about having a high density of cards anyway. And then if I draw like a Sneak Attack the next turn, cool, let's go off.
Yeah, the thing is, well, it cares up to a point. I think the fact that it does give him a high upside draw and Sneak Attack means that your play is correct, but Feline doesn't really need that big of a density of cards. I mean, 4 lands, a High Tide, and a Time Spiral, and she's good to go.
And we're off to the races.
Yeah.
Force of Will, removing a Cunning Wish is going to take care of that Sneak Attack. I thought for a moment we might see Longmore remove Flusterstorm, since she has 2 copies, but that is not the case. Just draws, plays an island, passes the turn back over to VanMeter. VanMeter will take a draw. It's a copy of Show and Tell.
Now, I think the fact that Feline has a Brainstorm means that she can keep Flusterstorm in her hand for 1 more turn, because the upside on that card is very high if Chris's hand is set up a specific way. And then if not, simply shovel away 1 or both copies.
Question here, of course, is VanMeter going to go for it? He would be able to play a land, cast a Show and Tell, and play around Flusterstorm, which would be for 2.
Well, the problem is that he's aware Feline has a Brainstorm. So
does
Feline
make a
can
problem,
Brainstorm and then Flusterstorm for 3.
And I believe that Feline wants to Brainstorm anyway. And it looks like Chris wants to Brainstorm as well, so that's exactly what he's going to do. So hit 1, 2, and 3 cards added to VanMeter's hand. He'll take a look at a Force of Will, another copy of Show and Tell. He'll move those around, and this is a situation again where we could just see Chris run out of Show and Tell just to run out of Show and Tell.
He's
got
got
to try to power through.
Yeah.
No. In the last turn for Feline, she just drew and passed the turn really quickly, so VanMeter basically just taking another turn here.
Which is curious because a lot of Feline's setup is sorcery speed. I mean, there's Ponders, Preordains, Merchant Scrolls. She has a ton of stuff to do on her own turn.
Mm-hmm. Chris looking to resolve this brainstorm. You know, one thing we haven't talked about, because we normally talk about it during the standard portion, because that's where Chris has been decimating people, the quest to shave the beard.
Yeah.
He's off to a 4-0 start here. Maybe we're jinxing it if we talk about it.
I've kind of stopped as a result. We'll talk about it if he's in the finals.
Yeah, fair enough.
I mean, he was finals up a game in Jersey, so,
Yikes.
you know, at this point, just trying to let the man do his thing.
Which is resolving a brainstorm. It looks like Emrakul and a fetch land are going to go back. You see the hand, double Force of Will, double Show and Tell, and a Gristlebrand. You wonder how much of a rush Chris is in to try to resolve something here.
It's tough just because Feline's Disruption here is so cheap. I'm sure he's looking for a sneak attack. Then he doesn't have to worry about Flusterstorm
Better
at least.
card, yeah.
He can also win in one turn as opposed to over the course of a second turn.
Also true. There's a Strand. Looks like he may cast a Show and Tell this go around. However, yeah, I think Chris realizes his mistake right now. If he casts a Show and Tell, Flusterstorm just does it straight up.
Yep.
Because Flusterstorm would actually be for 3. It would be for Show and Tell, the Brainstorm, and Flusterstorm itself.
Yeah, Chris needs to test spell in a world where he does not have to care about Flusterstorm. He can't afford to run any valuable cards straight into Flusterstorm. He needs to make Feline either have to play a second Flusterstorm or play some other piece of Disruption.
Just a Brainstorm in the end step here. Longmore actually making a move here on the end step. So 3 cards coming. 2 will go back in just a moment. I'll see if Longmore wants to sacrifice this fetch land or not. The answer is no. Take a draw.
That is not a good sign for Chris. Feline's hand is already pretty rolled up.
This is a Preordain. Hit 1 and 2. Those cards are going to go to the bottom. Mystery card coming. Deciding if maybe it's time to make a move. Just going to pass the turn back, potentially. And that's what it's going to be. VanMeter going to sacrifice a Flooded Strand in the meantime, go get a basic island out of the deck. Interesting thing here, life totals for the most part for both players don't really matter.
Not really, no.
Feline trying to deck with Brainstorm or make you draw, excuse me, Brain Freeze or make you draw your whole deck with Blue Sun Zenith. And of course, VanMeter just wants to hit you in one shot.
Yeah.
VanMeter going to take a draw, a Flooded Strand, add it to the grip. You see the hand, double Force Will, double Show and Tell, Gristlebrand. Nothing all that interesting going on here for Chris.
This is a pretty rolled up hand. I mean, he can cast the Show and Tell here and certainly not care about the first Flusterstorm.
That's what it looks like he's going to do.
And with 2 Force of Wills in hand already, if Chris is able to get this Gristlebrand into play, he's got a huge shot at winning this game.
We've got a response. It's going to be a Brainstorm. And again, I think the reason that the response is a Brainstorm, I imagine that Longmore still has the 2 copies of Flusterstorm, but this wants to add to the Storm count.
Yeah.
I think that's the reason you see this.
And it's hard for Chris to respond preemptively because, again, that's adding to the Storm count.
Flusterstorm, a great tool to be using in this matchup for Longmore. Going to put 2 cards back very quickly. Assess the situation. Looks like it may be time for a Flusterstorm, and it is. You've got a Storm count of 3, I believe. You've got Show and Tell, Brainstorm, Flusterstorm itself.
Yeah. Again, because these are Storm copies, Force of Will is not very good at fighting this. Each of these can only stop one individual copy.
So pay 3 mana. Will VanMeter, Longmore. We'll sacrifice a Flooded Strand, go get a basic island. Just a couple of fetches laying around in this deck. 3 Flooded Strands, 3 Polluted Deltas to go on 12 islands for the High Tide player. Just to make it those brainstorms, those ponders a little bit better. Nothing too crazy going on there. Now this may be the other Flusterstorm. And it is. So a lot of copies of that. Of course, that will take care of show and tell. So VanMeter actually had to make that happen to open up the door in the other show and tell.
Right. And again, Force of Will not really adding that much to Chris's ability to fight through.
Brainstorm time. 1, 2, and 3.
Attention Magic players in the standard open trial.
A couple of cards going to go back there for Longmore.
Magic players in the standard open trial.
Has she cobbled together what she's looking for? That's the question.
And if Chris's hand right now is show and tell Force of Will, so we can push through. But keep in mind that let's say Feline has a Force of Will or Chris has to use all of his blue cards there. He can only draw 7 because he's at 12, and 2 Force of Wills are down.
Yep.
So there's no guarantee that Griselbrand even results in a game win because Feline can simply win the game next turn.
Preordain here. Puts 2 cards to the bottom very quickly. Chris draws another copy of Show and Tell. I think the reason that's important, truthfully, just because it's another blue card.
Yeah.
So it's go time. And time to put something into play. An island and a Griselbrand. I think Longmore was probably hoping that was Emrakul.
Yes.
Which is a very strange thing to say, but I actually think that's the case.
Well, Emrakul is at least a free pass for 1 turn.
Yeah.
But Chris with 2 Force of Wills in hand now, it's going to be a tough game for Feline to win.
All she can do is draw and pass the turn back and hope for the best. VanMeter will take a draw. It's a copy of Emrakul. Gonna activate old Gristledad. Gotta imagine he's looking for a sneak attack now. Get it over in 1 turn.
Try to get the perfecto.
Yep. Looking for a red card in the grip. I see one.
Yep.
There's a Cataxian probe too. Can clear the way. Make sure everything's safe.
That is a powerful hand of magic cards right there.
It sure is. See if he wants to pay for the probe here. If he thinks the coast is clear, doesn't need to. Looks like he will pay. Looks like he's going to go down to 3. Got to be a little careful here.
Yeah, but since Feline provided no resistance last turn, it's safe to assume there's not much resistance left over. And given the circumstances, her hand's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, Force Flusterstorm in a Time Spiral. I've seen worse.
Better than I would have anticipated, given that the Griselbrand resolved last turn and then nothing happened on Feline's turn.
Yeah. Wasn't able to find a Scroll or a High Tide, it looks like. That's all. Those are the 2 cards that really matter.
Yeah.
If you're Chris here, you don't have to force through the sneak attack in this situation. You have Griselbrand in play. You've got a great hand. Multiple copies of Force Will, multiple blue cards, a Spell Pierce. So I think it would be convenient to be able to cast Show and Tell here and it resolve and kill in 1 shot, but I don't think you have to do that.
Well, I still think he's happy to test the waters here with that sneak attack and nothing else. He's going to have to discard a hand size. He has nothing else to do with his mana. And Feline has to use a Force of Will. And if she loses the Flusterstorm, presumably to the Force of Will, that means that it's pretty easy to win next turn.
And there's a hard cast Force of Will. I'm checking the storm count. The storm count is 3 for Flusterstorm here. I think that's what Chris is interested in. You've got Probe, Sneak Attack, and Force of Will being cast. So then Chris is deciding, all right, do I want to have this battle? Flusterstorm gumming things up. I see a little Spell Pierce action here.
Yeah, I think Chris here is happy to leave, if he Spell Pierces here, Feline presumably will use the Flusterstorm. She's down to just Time Spiral against Chris's multiple Force of Wills. So at that point, Chris can just let this go and defend himself easily over the next couple of turns.
That's Flusterstorm. Again, VanMeter sitting at 3. And actually, and I like this a lot because, okay, this takes care of everything. My sneak attack doesn't resolve. That's fine. You know, I don't have to have that much of a fight because here's the thing. He's going to go down to 2 here to take care of that, to put sneak attack into play. He can't search for a red land.
Yeah.
Because all of his volcanics are in play. So he can't actually put Emrakul into play right now anyway. Now, this may have just been him saying, well, I just really, really want sneak attack into play just to kill you next turn.
Yeah.
And that's fine.
And he still has Force of Will left over in all this too.
Yeah.
So there's no draw that Feline has that kills him.
So sneak attack does resolve after all that stuff. And it leaves Longmore with just a time spiral in hand. So Chris has exhausted all the resources. Has a Gristlebrand. Doesn't need to activate it. Has Force of Will plus a blue card. So this is the driver's seat here. Just going to pass the turn back, let Longmore take a draw. This might be a hope for the best with a time spiral. Yeah, and there's a high tide. I imagine that Chris says that's fine. And Longmore has to hope that there's no forcible over there.
It doesn't matter. Chris can force this or the time spiral.
Mm-hmm. And he says, I'll force this. So that gets taken care of. Time spiral can't be cast. 1 mana short. I'll show you an Emrakul for the sneak attack, and that is going to do it. So Chris VanMeter is going to win game number 1 here over Feline. Longmore sneak and show up a game here over High Tide.
Tough fought game there by both sides, but Feline just not able to find a High Tide in time. Spun her wheels for too long and wasn't able to assemble a kill. Interestingly enough there, she kept the 1 lander, and it looks like she just flooded out.
Yeah, kind of awkward, right?
The deck's only got 18 lands in it. There's 12 islands and 6 fetch lands to do a little shuffling with your brainstorms and so forth. But she just drew a lot of lands there.
It's sideboard time. We'll start with High Tide, which you have in front of you.
Now, she is playing with Cunning Wish, and so a lot of her sideboard slots are accounted for because of that. There's a Blue Sun Zenith, a Brain Freeze, an Intuition, a Turnabout, a Rebuild, a Snap, a Flusterstorm, a Pact of Negation, and a Surgical Extraction. Pretty sure that she's going to be bringing in the Flusterstorm here and the Pact of Negation because she's just trying to push through a kill in 1 turn. Pact of Negation is not very good against people who are trying to disrupt you with discard, but it is very good against people who are trying to fight you with counterspells because it's more mana efficient and card efficient than even Force of Will. She also has 2 copies of Wipe Away and 4 copies of Counterbalance in her sideboard. I believe Counterbalance is a sideboard plan against decks that are much more 1 and 2 mana oriented.
Delver.
Because with her, all of her cantrips and her own 1 mana spells, Counterbalance is, it's not the lock that it is normally, but she can manipulate it quite a bit. And in fact, there's 4 copies of Sensei's Divining Top that she's added to the deck as well. So she can just go to the full Counterbalance lock. But this does not feel like that kind of matchup.
Yeah, this took me by surprise last week when we watched Longmore play against Matt Hoey. And I took a look at her deck list and saw the 4 tops in the main and the 4 balances in the sideboard. I believe this is something that she tried for the first time in Somerset with High Tide and wants to see how well this works out, maybe leading into the Invitational. As far as VanMeter's sideboard, Graph Digger's Cage, 2 Swan Song, 3 Blood Moons, 3 Pyroclasm, 3 copies of Through the Breach, a Shattering Spree, an Echoing Truth, and a Boseiju who shelters all. A god like Boseiju here to force through a show and tell. I imagine Swan Song is pretty good on the defensive. The rest of the cards here, not all that exciting. If he does want to get a little redundant with these, get a large monster into play effects, you could certainly bring in some number of Through the Breach.
Through the Breach seems pretty rough against an opponent where your show and tell is good and they have Flusterstorm.
Yes.
I think he's probably just going to want to stay with his base 8 cards to cheat to play.
I imagine he doesn't change too much.
The Boseiju seems excellent.
Yeah.
Feline's shown all number of counter spells.
I like that. I like Swan Songs.
Yeah.
So we'll be underway in game number 2 in just a little bit here. If you are just joining us, Cedric Phillips, Patrick Sullivan, Star City Games Open Series here in Providence. We are in round 5 of 9 of our Legacy Open at SCG Live, hashtag SCGPROV for your tweets. You can also contact us directly if you'd like, at Basic Mountain for Patrick, at Cedric A. Phillips for me. We've had some fun conversations with you guys through Twitter over the course of this weekend. It's been a fun weekend so far watching Ross Merriam hoist the trophy with Mono Blue Devotion in Standard. We're making our way through a nice Legacy tournament here. We've talked about quite a bit that win with Mono Blue Devotion, along with the rest of that top 8, probably going to have a huge impact on the Season 2 Invitational next weekend. We'll see what the results do to this tournament.
3 straight-up monocolor beatdown decks and 2 mono blacks and the mono red deck we saw in the finals. And then Ross winning with Mono Blue Devotion. Those are 2 really big storylines from that tournament.
Now, the green decks haven't been that good this particular weekend. Great in the previous 2. You know who's a big fan of green decks?
Brian Kibler.
That's correct. He's also a big fan of lounging on a couch. He likes to do that with that winning smile and that 10. Look at that. That hair is a 10.
It's a 10.
That is a 10. I wish I had that hair.
It is a 10.
And you can get a hold of this playmat and all of its beauty at Star City Games. We're selling these now at the Open Series as well on the website for you. You can find out more information about it there. But really, who could say no to that face?
It is charming in its own way.
I think that's a compliment. In a roundabout way?
Sure. You take it however you like.
I think Brian will do the same. Of course, you can find these at any Open Series events and, of course, on StarCityGames.com. It's been a fun mat, and people do truly enjoy them.
And it is pretty funny, in fairness.
Of course it is. It's taken on a life of its own.
Yeah.
It really, really has.
If you're just a Brian Kibler enthusiast, you can enjoy it on that level. And if you are sort of a meta humorist, you can enjoy it on that level too.
Now, I know people are wondering, was the first Brian Kibler, calendar going to come out? What do you think about that?
Why not?
Absolutely. All 12 months.
What do we have left that we're trying to protect?
Yeah.
Why not?
All 12 months, maybe in costumes of green creatures and dragons. Who knows? There's a lot of range there, I think.
Yeah.
See both players taking a look at opening hands here in Longmore. Again, going to be on the play. VanMeter on the draw as he did win game number 1.
Now that dog Shiro, on the other hand, I would purchase a Shiro calendar.
Absolutely. That's a winning dog.
Yeah.
That is a high-quality dog. I'll tell you one thing Brian does right on Twitter. There's a lot of Shiro on his Twitter.
Oh, he knows where his bread is buttered. That's
That is
for sure.
correct. It is the pooch.
Yeah.
That is a winning dog as VanMeter again going to take a mulligan down here to, it looks like 6 cards.
Yeah.
I'd buy a Shiro calendar, perhaps a Shiro playmat.
Shiro's also got a lot of personality.
I've never met Shiro.
Yeah, it's a dog with that dog is fully enabled by Brian and Natalie, so it's basically like a person. 'Cause it gets fed on time. It gets fed, like real turkey and stuff like that. So
speaking of pets, how is Sergeant Whiskers?
he is doing well.
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah. He's a good boy.
Old Sarge. Do you call him Sarge? Do you call him Whiskers?
Sarge.
Sarge, nice. Chris looking at a hand that is apparently good enough. You see an Emrakul and there's an Ancient Tomb over there. Here's an island. This is a Sensei's Divining Top. Yeah, Chris hand looks good enough. You got a Ponder. There's a Swan Song over there. And now there's a Sneak Attack. Of course, that's the thing that makes this deck so scary to play against. You see that opening hand, you see, oh, I got a Ponder, I got a Swan Song, I got an Emrakul, which is kind of out of place, and a couple of lances. I have a Sneak Attack, and now I have the combo all of a sudden, and now I'm just working towards killing you with that combo.
It can go from nothing to everything very fast. Feline's been playing 18 lands, 12 island, 6 fetch lands for a very long time, as long as I can remember. Now that she's playing with 4 Divining Tops in her main deck, I'm surprised that hasn't been reshuffled a little bit. Feels like you would want the 7th or 8th fetch land once you have Divining Top in the deck.
It's a little scary to play with more fetch lands, I think, just because of Stifle.
Oh, there's cost. Yeah. Don't get me wrong here, but it seems like that would move the dial a little bit at least.
VanMeter gonna untap and take his turn after just a polluted Delta there from Longmore. Looks like Chris picked up a copy of Force of Will. This is a Flooded Strand.
How many fetch lands versus basics are you supposed to play in your monocolor deck is always something, with Burn, for example, where I just felt I was guessing.
Yeah, your guess is as good as mine.
Yeah,
trust me. Gonna spin the top, gonna leave it. And like what she found, looks like it may be a counterbalance. We're gonna try to establish this. Okay.
All right.
Was not expecting to see counterbalance. Will Chris fight over this? I wonder how scared Chris is of this.
Well, Sneak Attack is fairly stable against counterbalance. There's only, I believe, 1/4 in Feline's deck, which is the Turnabout. Not that Chris knows this necessarily. But there's other implications to counterbalance, since a Divining Top being in play, of course.
Yeah, Chris seems a little worried about this, and with good reason, because now he has to think about, okay, does she have 4s? Is my Sneak Attack good to go? Because presumably, my cantrips and stuff are not.
Yeah. Also, this is the only blue card that he has in his hand right now with his Force of Will. There's a lot of implications here.
Yeah. Maybe it's as simple as just Swan Song this.
I think so, because your Swan Song is not worth very much once counterbalance Divining Top's in play, so
yeah.
This kind of forces the hand.
Yeah. Oh, fire away with a Swan Song on the counterbalance. Longmore is going to sacrifice the blue to Delta in response. Get a basic island, of course, and we'll see what she wants to find. it time to spin a top? Is it a Flusterstorm again? Decisions. It's going to be a Flusterstorm to take care of the Swan Song. So a whole bunch of those are going to take care of that.
Yeah, that's the third spell this turn.
However, the shields are down right now. VanMeter are going to sacrifice a Flooded Strand. This is probably going to be a Volcanic Island. There that is.
Yeah, Chris can ignore all this by just successfully resolving Sneak Attack this turn.
Yeah,
so
that's all that it really takes. So Chris gonna untap that island. He will take a draw. And we know about the double land, picks up a copy of Volcanic Island. And I think in this situation, you just got to put the pedal to the metal.
It's not getting better by waiting now against a Divining Top and a counterbalance.
Right? If you're Chris right now, WWTD, what would Todd do?
Channel your inner Todd and just slap that bad boy on the table and hope that it works.
That's right. Counterbalance trigger.
It's a turnabout.
It is Immersion Scroll. You saw Chris cross the fingers. You better have it, or you're in some trouble.
And Feline's hand does not look even close to equipped to go off at this point.
Longmore going to take a draw, picks up that Merchant Scroll. Can't be thrilled with how things are going. You can definitely tell she isn't. There's a Brainstorm over there. We know about a Merchant Scroll as well. You see the top plus counterbalance. Oftentimes a pretty good lock, but Sneak Attack has made it in.
It's not clear the number of ways that Feline has to get out of this. I mean, there are a couple copies of Wipe Away in her sideboard, but she has nowhere near the amount of mana necessary to Cunning Wish or do anything of the sort. So
feels like a cross your fingers situation.
And
like
we know
Chris doesn't have a big monster.
And I've got some bad news.
I'm afraid I have some bad news. Yeah. Yeah. Trigger. Emrakul. That's a neat card.
That is nice.
Attack Step. We're going to see a Brainstorm here. I think someone knows they're losing all their permanents in just a moment.
Yeah.
Trying to reset up and hope for the best. How? Annihilation complete. There goes Longmore's entire board and a good portion of that life total as well. So there goes Emrakul. That's going to shuffle in a bunch of stuff.
And Chris has the second one for next turn.
Yep. It seems like, you know, this matchup, it seems like Longmore's deck is just a turn too slow.
Yeah, and I was not a big fan of bringing counterbalance in this matchup. It's just, it's going to be good some percentage of games, but it's going to be nothing in a large percentage of games too, and this is one of the nothing ones. As the two Emrakuls go walking hand in hand down to the plus size store together.
Flooded Strand will bring Longmore down to 3. Looks like this may be a top. And it will be. Chris says, I have an Emrakul again. And that is going to do it. Chris VanMeter is going to win this match over Feline Longmore, 2-0. Sneak and Show moving on to 5-0, defeating High Tide. And it looks like VanMeter may have figured out what deck he needs to play at the Invitational next week.
He's had some success historically with blue-red combo decks. I mean, Hive Mind he had some tournament performances with.
This is true.
And there's a large history of Sneak and Show players coming out of Roanoke and Star City games. So might as well just do this. Why mess around?
Yeah, again, it surged huge last year. Up